My boyfriend is addicted to engaging in intimate behavior with a game doll. I advised him to exercise moderation, take care of his health, and go to the hospital for frequent checkups. But he resented me for being boring and nagging, in order to play with the game dolls even more recklessly. He completely appropriated my property. My boyfriend pushed me down the stairs with his own hands, and trapped my consciousness in a love game I developed myself, forcing me to become the lowest NPC, suffering endless shame and torture night after night, reincarnated in a new life. I returned to when my boyfriend had just come out of the experience room with an insatiable look on his face as he belittled me for being interesting and mundane. This time, I withdrew the worry from my eyes and immediately called security. Do I know you? Get off my property. In this life. He probably doesn't know it yet. Because of his prolonged and uncontrolled intimate contact with simulated human games, he, has long been infected with AIDS. Cindy. Is that so? It's just a game. Do you still want to be jealous with the game? Opening his eyes again, his boyfriend Leo's voice came into his ears. At this moment, he was naked, and was crossing his legs in the experience cabin, disgruntled and scornful of me. I stared at him blankly, a flicker of disbelief flashing through me. What was going on here? Wasn't I supposed to be trapped inside a game? Why was I in the lab? It wasn't until after confirming that the scene in front of me was really no longer the various erotic scenes, and those disgusting virtual men. It was only after confirming that the scene in front of me was no longer the various erotic scenes, and those disgusting virtual men that I could touch the real scene in front of my eyes that made me believe that I had been reborn. And when Leo saw me like this, he thought that I hadn't accepted the truth yet, and continued to explain. I just don't have any interest in you. What can I do? Why don't you find out more about yourself? Besides, you are so old and not good looking. It's normal that I have no desire for you. Why do you have to be so catty? And I'm not cheating on you. I'm just playing a game. Why are you giving me a hard time? If it wasn't for the sake of helping you test these things, I wouldn't be playing this kind of game. It's hurtful. But can't the characters in this be a bit more forward and backward? Like in foreign countries? After saying that, he didn't care about my reaction, and his hands skillfully clicked on the panel to select his female love guest this time. That was the Love VR Experience Hall game I developed, in which all real love scenes can be realistically simulated, including that aspect of it. You can also be in the realm of it. After letting Leo experience it once, he became addicted and ran to play it a few times a day, and also beautifully called it being my experimental guinea pig. At this point, I was coldly watching the man, with only the thought of rushing over and flaying him in my head. Because the person who personally pushed me off the roof of a building and trapped me inside the game in my previous life. It was him. In his previous life, Leo personally pushed me off the roof of a building and trapped my consciousness inside the game. He made me the game's lovely female guest, or the night special. I struggled in the game and was forced to be humiliated. It wasn't until I finally discovered the game bug that I finally destroyed the entire game. I also dragged Leo, who entered the game that day, down to hell with me. But why is it that when I open my eyes again, I actually return to the time when the game was first introduced? I looked at the scene in front of me, and lost the ability to speak for a moment. The collaborator behind me, however, couldn't help but speak at this time. Cindy. What's going on? Looking at the obviously embarrassed and angry collaborator, I suddenly remembered that today. It just so happened to be the time when I had made an appointment with the collaborator to witness the official experience of the game. But today in my previous life, Leo had scurried out of nowhere, not only naked, but also speaking in such a manner that was not admonishing. Even if it was a collaboration, the other party was definitely not happy to see it. And in my previous life, I was led by Leo. And in the face of such a scene because of the shame, I only thought of escaping. As a result, I watched the opportunity that I had so hard to fight for go down the drain, resulting in one huge blow to my career. The game also did not come out smoothly. This also facilitated Leo's theft of my work. It wasn't until after my death that I realized he did all this because he was unhappy that my career was about to succeed and that I would step on his head. If I had to do it all over again, I wouldn't let him have his way. Looking at my Leo, the smile in a cane gradually faded away. As he was about to lie down in the experience cabin again, I reached out and beckoned the security guard behind me. "Excuse me. We're the ones who let the suspicious people in. We'll take care of it right away." The security guards then grabbed Leo, who was lying inside the pod, and carried him out like a pig. Cindy. What do you mean?" When Leo saw that I was serious, he immediately started yelling. "I'm your boyfriend. I'm also the director of the company. What do you mean, stranger?" "Cindy?" "Security. If this gentleman keeps talking nonsense, you can just throw him out like this to the outside of the company. Also, if you guys can't even control a crazy person, you don't need to be the company's security. It's useless." Shouting was useless, and he could only look at me with indignation. And I immediately brought the collaborators to another experience pod. And after apologizing to them, I immediately asked my assistant to pull out the experience pod that Leo had just laid down in, to thoroughly clean and disinfect it, and if necessary, to directly replace the skin. Although this time the release story development was not as awkward as before, the other party was obviously still a bit hesitant. Finally dropped a line about reconsidering and left. It wasn't until everyone left that I had lost all my strength and began to slowly digest the fact that I had been reborn. After all, I had really been reborn. But this fear wasn't everything that was real. But just now, that regretful memory that I had fantasized about countless times in my own brain, I finally had the chance to actually do something to change it as well. Looking at my hands, I looked at the game interface again. Since I'm in a new life, I must live well and move towards the life I was supposed to have, so that the scum will receive retribution. That night, I returned home. As soon as I opened the door, I didn't have a good face. "Cindy, what do you mean today? You actually let the security guards rack me away and make me so humiliated. Are you still my girlfriend or not?" I gave him a cold look and was just about to change my shoes when I remembered that at this time in my previous life, Leo had been tested for AIDS. Instantly, I felt that this house was full of germs. So he stopped changing his shoes and half leaned against the doorway. "I just want to ask you. Obviously you know that there are partners coming today. Why do you still want to do such disgusting things? I don't remember that this game still needs to be stripped naked. Even if you want to play the game. Obviously there is a game pod in the backstage. You can both play and avoid the crowd. But you chose the most conspicuous place. Did you do it on purpose?" Leo saw me directly poking his mind, and slightly whitened his face, but still blurted out a sentence. "Nerve. Who would have thought that you just happened to bring someone with you? And I obviously had the good intention to help you with the test. Cindy, you're not doubting me, are you?" Seeing that I was silent, Leo obviously realized the difference in me today, and sat up straight to defend himself. From the time we met and knew each other, but I only felt noisy. "Cindy, how could you think this way about me? Obviously, there were so many rich white girls pursuing me. But I only chose you." Leo's words were earnest and full of tenderness. "But I know. That tenderness under the hidden is to kill me sharp knife. I know Leo and now has been 7 years. Love 6 years. When the university. He and I are a university, he is older than me. Is my senior. He said he was originally a very proud person. Like only the swan with his head held high. Until he saw me. Voluntarily lowered his head to look at me. Even the pursuit of the time. He also do people know. As if that is all his heart, we smoothly into a chapter together. Until now graduation has been 3 years. I set up the company has been a small success. Also let him sit on the director. At the beginning we also agreed that as soon as the game came out, we will get married. Unfortunately, in my previous life, I didn't wait for that day until I died. Not only was he addicted to the game, he would also go to that kind of sharing doll experience center. And even contracted a dirty disease, creating rumors after I left and portraying himself as a victim. Even when I said he had AIDS, I was hollered at to produce evidence, setting me up in a dogfight. Now that I think about it, from the very beginning, he put me on the unequal romantic relationship. At least he thought that I would not have been able to get into his eyes. Baby, can we stop? Leo's voice came out laced with exhaustion, and he reached up and pinched the bridge of his nose. He always does this when he realizes he's being unreasonable. As if I'm the one being unreasonable and he's the one being hurt. I'm having a hard time today. I've been having a fever and headache. Can you take me to the hospital tomorrow for a checkup? Leo thought he had given me a step, and looked at me with a light in his eyes. And I suddenly remembered that in my previous life it was today that the collaborator left in anger. And I was just about to get angry and accuse Leo when he pretended to be sick. I was so scared that I hurriedly took him to the hospital for a checkup. Only then did I accidentally check out his AIDS. But because it was found in time, the degree is not serious. Just need to take medicine to isolate, but now, I don't want his condition to be controlled anymore. I turned my head to Leo, and a smile broke out on my face. Okay. Early the next morning, I took Leo to the hospital. But instead of doing a full body checkup like in his previous life, he just asked the doctor to prescribe him a little medicine for his headache. After all, Leo at this time didn't have any obvious features. He was also supposed to be faking his illness, and was not very present about it. So, in the end, we just prescribed a bottle of painkillers and left. On the way, I told Leo about my business trip away from home. His face was sad, but the excitement in his eyes was not well hidden. But it didn't matter. After all, the more excited he was, the less alert he would be. Sure enough, on the afternoon of my business trip, he couldn't wait to run to the company to test the game. However, he was told that there was no need to test it anymore during this time, as the partners no longer felt it was necessary. The experience spots were all shut down as well. The boyfriend was furious and lashed out at the other party. In the end, he had to go home with his head down in defeat. But instead of going home, he turned his head and went to the shared doll experience. We have been together for 6 years, and I am busy with my work. His passion for me has long since disappeared in his previous life. It was because he went to such a place that he contracted AIDS. But let yourself think about it countless times. But also not as good as you see with your own eyes, well in the heart as early as in the previous life has died. I looked at Leo's car with cold eyes, saved the video I just recorded, and turned to leave. This time, I'd like to see how he'd end up without me to tie him down. After traveling for a week, Leo began to send me messages, saying he missed me, inquiring sideways about the time I'd be back. I told him it was soon. But by this time I had already arrived at the airport abroad. The business trip wasn't entirely fake. Although the previous life game failed online, it still received quite a stir. Although it didn't create any big waves in the country, the sensation was not small. This kind of design that was unique to adults showed off quite a few images that people were ashamed to talk about. If there is a need, there is fulfillment. Not to mention that this kind of thing was originally a normal human need. Ever since the game was lighted out. Externally, quite a few game designers have even developed better, more flattering games in the meantime. As a result, even though Leo had also put the game online in his previous life, it had long been occupied by foreign games of the same type. Although it also made a lot of money, but it was not as amazing as it was expected to be. And I went abroad this time. Visit is the previous life of the same kind of game biggest company designer Len Neifer. The first thing I did after being reborn, I sent him my game concept as well as experimental data, making it clear that I needed her help. After all, although our country has the largest population, but also for many things are also the worst export. At first Leo thought the same thing, and was very unsupportive of me making this game. He even mocked me for being a girl and making this kind of game. But he seems to have forgotten that my original intention of making this game was not for sex. Rather, it was for the exchange of souls between the two characters. Only between the exchange of love. Sex is the simplest, most basic, and most powerful expression. In my final design, you can set the love guest as you want it to be. In other words, you can fall in love with anyone of your own in this game, and she will only belong to yourself. For example, a separated partner, a young regret, a deceased relative, and so on. This time, the game will break through the original concept of this world and display every drop of sweat in front of yourself. It's just a shame that in my previous life I was killed before I could complete the final setup, and I could only watch as my own heart and soul was completely reduced to a disreputable otaku game. And Jennifer, after looking at my design concepts, was very interested in sub and immediately invited me to her design studio. She praised my design as not only unique, but will be a breakthrough. It would be the latest breakthrough in the history of VR. For her, it's a challenge. It's her joining me that's going to be the biggest push for me. 7 By the time I got back from my trip, it was already 3 months later. During this 3-month period, Jennifer and I have been able to improve a lot of the game's data through our exchanges. The data that passed through her hands actually became as obedient as a puppy, and many bugs were found and fixed by her. She also optimized the scenes, the character animation, and the controllability of the development of things. In the end, I looked at the nearly perfect game and smiled heartily. Jennifer, meeting you is really the biggest luck in my life. Len Pfeiffer. Mouth fish, still biting her pen. Between words she cocked her head at me and did not spare her smile. I am. Cindy. Did I ever tell you? You're the one who's good to the core. A sense of fulfillment and excitement that I had never felt before spread throughout my body, as I was allowed to set foot in the country once again. This time I'll take everything I've lost and stand back where I belong. Just after getting off the plane, I saw the team already waiting at the airport. They held their name tags high and let out a cheer the moment they saw me again. I smiled and went up to embrace them, excitedly walking towards the office. Leo, on the other hand, had told them back when I left the country to prevent Leo from making a disillusioned face, and not to let him find out about our preparations. So all this time, everyone is hiding from Leo. Originally, he is a titular director with no real role. In addition to the fact that we almost lost an important cooperation because of him last time, everyone was already dissatisfied with him. So naturally, no one would rush to waste their hard work now. That's right. It was almost. Because our cooperation was never cancelled from the beginning to the end. Last time, even though there was Leo's incident, but because there was no delay in the subsequent experience and introduction, the cooperation was finalized the same day the partner went back. My study abroad is also quite advanced. If not because the cooperation was finalized, the subsequent takeover can be steadily developed. I have no way to just leave straight away. Just after arriving at work, we all couldn't wait to start testing the stability of the game this time around. After seeing an almost brand new game again, everyone was excited. Compared to before, not only was it more stable, but it had a distinct style and the stats had improved tremendously. It was almost as if it would shock the gaming world with its existence once it went live. Just after completing the test, Jennifer sent a message. The content was probably that the main setting of the game had been basically finalized, and it would only take 3 months to complete the launch. They can take care of the publicity abroad, but we have to rely on ourselves for the publicity in China. I smiled and told this good news to the crowd. A time in the office cheered. At that moment, the secretary looked at me and stopped talking. Under my puzzled gaze, she slowly spoke. Mr. Chen. A few days ago, I saw Director Lee in the hospital. I nodded, not really caring. What happened? The doctor who examined her was my husband, and after the examination, he told me that Superintendent Lee, he seemed to be sick. Or, a dirty disease. He told me after the examination that Director Lee seems to be sick. Or a dirty disease. 9. It looks like Leo's condition has been discovered after all. What a shame. I was going to wait until he died to tell him. But come to think of it. After all, during the 3 months I was gone, he hung out in those experience halls day in and day out. There were times when he could even see the last person coming out. And he couldn't wait to get in Joe. But thanks to his impatience and lack of moderation, his condition has worsened so quickly. It's now in the middle to late stages. Well, it's time to get rid of this slag, lest it be an eyesore. And when I saw Leo at the hospital with a crying face, I only felt a sense of relief. The fact that I came back wasn't publicized. Plus he didn't care about the company, so he didn't know about it. Now that I suddenly appeared in front of him, he was even more startled. Cindy, why are you here? He looked at me uncertainly. And after confirming that the person in front of him was really me, he immediately tensed up, hiding the diagnosis in his hand behind him. Why did you come back all of a sudden? You didn't tell me. I didn't even go to pick you up. I just laughed coldly at the situation. You'll be damned if I don't come back. Leo, those fake things out there are so much fun that you want to play them even though you're sick? Leo's face changed and he immediately realized that I already knew the truth. It's not like that. Baby. Let me explain first. I don't know what's going on here either. But I really didn't cheat. You believe me. Facing this distant name, I just felt sick. Maybe he himself didn't even realize that every time he called me baby, it was always after the heartbreak of making a mistake. Leo. Do you think I don't know? You just haven't cheated on me with anyone. You're almost a member of this city's shared doll experience. Aren't you? You think that when I am abroad and can't watch you or control you, you are getting more and more unrestrained. And now you have this disease in your body. You really make me feel sick. 10. Seeing me just staring at him in disgust, Leo was completely scared. From graduation until now, his job, salary, including a place to live, and living expenses were all claimed on me. It can be said that as long as he left me, he no longer had any financial resources. Perhaps he himself also discovered this. His face turned white, and his body began to tremble slightly, even directly kneeled down in the next second. Baby. I know I was wrong. But I swear I went that one time. I don't know why I contracted this disease, but I just missed you so much that I just couldn't take it anymore and went. Believe me. Leo anxiously explained to me, reaching out and grabbing my wrist tightly. Baby. Will you believe me? I really didn't betray you. The only person I love is you. I just want to help you finish the progress of the game's trial. The more he said, the more heartfelt Leo's voice became. Just as I was still pondering, Leo spoke again. Baby. As lovers, shouldn't we trust each other? Maybe what we are facing now is a little test. Baby. I can give you anything. I only ask for one thing. Trust me. Okay? I really haven't done anything. Don't you understand me? Even if I have contracted the disease, it was an accident. A malicious revenge by someone else. Because of such an incident, should we let our 6-year-long relationship break up? Leo seemed to see that I was still not moved. So he simply kowtowed to me. Baby. Shouldn't lovers trust each other and support each other? Can we only share the good and not the bad? I'm begging you. Give me another chance. You've been alone with so many men for so long, and I didn't even suspect you. And now that I'm just sick, why are you so heartless to abandon me? His voice was not small. And with this still being a hospital, a number of people gradually gathered around him. Oh my God. How could there be such a shameless woman? How can there be such a shameless woman who stays alone with other men? Not knowing what she's doing. Not knowing any shame. Look at them. They're not breaking up because they're sick. They've had enough. This guy is a real boiled goat. He's a disgrace to us men. Hey buddy. If I say, this kind of fishing girl you still so lick. Are you brain kicked by a donkey? Just like in my previous life. Those who don't know the truth are accusing me recklessly. As if they knew all the truth and were doing justice to the victim. A trace of smugness crossed Leo's eyes extremely quickly. But when he looked again, all that was left was supplication. Thinking about the net storm in my previous life. It began with someone recording a video of this fracas. I glanced into the crowd and saw several cell phones held high in the air. I looked at the black footage of those facing me and immediately crouched down to the ground, pretending to break down and covering my face as I cried out in pain. Then what do you want me to do? You said you didn't go out and screw around. You didn't do anything. But I was only abroad for 3 months. How did you contract AIDS? It's still advanced. Now that the results are right in front of me. How can I lie to myself and how can I trust you? 11 Although I didn't finish my sentence. This was a hospital. And anyone who was looking for it had common sense. Instantly. The crowd surrounding us immediately dispersed and expanded several times. Leo seemed to be not expecting that I would just say everything out loud. And his face changed dramatically. All right. Don't talk nonsense. Let's go home and talk about what's going on. Forcibly pulling me towards the outside of the hospital. I directly slapped the past. Taking advantage of the man 8 pain stunned at the time to break free of his constraints. Ran to the side of the security guard who rushed to the side. Crying pear blossom with rain. Home? You still think we can have a home? Leo, you are so dirty. Let's break up. After saying break up, I ran straight back home. I told my secretary to call the workers, threw out all of Leo's things, and burned them cleanly with fire. Although I knew that the source of the infection survived in the air for a very short period of time. Just in case. I had the workers put on protective clothing. Gas masks were put on. With Leo looking on incredulously. I kicked him right out of the house. Naturally. I wouldn't really live in it. Instead, I found a professional disinfection company and thoroughly decontaminated the house inside and out. The dislike was overflowing. Leo looked at me. And his eyes had changed from the initial prayers to indignation. Cindy, what do you mean by this? Do you really want to break up with me that badly? I didn't even look at him. I only wore the mask and sprayed several sprays of alcohol into the area where he was standing. Yes. Seeing me do that. The anger on his face increased. Cindy, don't think you're so great. The world can't go on without you. I've been with you for 6 years and served you for 6 years. And this is how you treat me. You dislike me like this today because I'm sick with a minor illness. And you'll end up the same way when you get sick in the future. Because the money was taken for research and development. The neighborhood we bought is a cheap resettlement house. The sound priming is very poor. His shouts directly disturbed the surrounding neighbors and quite a few people we knew stepped forward. The neighbors began to talk and discuss. Even a few older women had started to reach out and accuse me. And because of my personality, I never take the initiative to greet strangers. On weekdays, Leo is responsible for the aspects of life. He is in these grandparents' relationship is good. A few times I quarreled with him the next day. The neighborhood on the big women are in my stretching behind the finger pointing. And even more directly behind the finger pointing. The next day after I had a fight with him. Some of the older women in neighborhood were pointing at me. And some of them even pulled me over to give me a verbal lecture. It's like Leo is their child. He is now doing this. Is biting the ice still want to live here? Embarrassed to say really can he wrong? In my previous life. After the net violence. I am no longer the same person. 12 Xiao Chen. This is your fault. How can you not be sick in this world? You've been together for so long. You should support each other, and take care of each other. Yes, Xiao Chen. You don't just holler at people who love you because you're young. The small fights on weekdays are fine. But now you're kicking people out. What kind of a thing is that? Who in the neighborhood doesn't know that your man is the best? Not only does he have to earn money to support the family, but he also has to take care of you, and put up with your temper. You've been together for so long. You're almost married. So it's not that big of a deal. Neighbors were talking to each other. as if they had already identified me as the one who had acted capriciously in this case. I was not surprised. After all, after the accident, the neighbors also stood on Leo's side. At that time I realized how bad I was in Leo's mouth. But live to see his room, spend his money, but also to him non-beat that even so. Leo also still single-mindedly love me. But now I have to tear off this mask of his. A minor illness? I sneered. Then you dared to tell the neighbors what kind of disease you were suffering from? Leo froze, as if he didn't expect me to respond. Goodbye to my aura. Come and get ready to do something. Cindy. Let's talk about what's going on. I don't blame you anymore. If you want me to go, I'll just go. Leo was ready to leave with a quick step. This is still a special arrangement by the little secretary who was afraid that I would get hurt. Since you're too embarrassed to tell, I'll tell everyone for you. From the beginning of our relationship, you have been using my money, living in my room. Even the job was found for you by me. How come all these became yours in other people's mouths? Cindy. Enough. Suddenly, Leo interrupted me with a voice and knelt down again. I beg you. Stop saying that. It's all my fault. I shouldn't have begged you like this. I shouldn't have pestered you to make up with me. I know I'm wrong. I'll leave now. I know I'm wrong. I'm leaving now. Leo was trembling as he retreated. People around me thought that he was too much in love, and only thought that I was too much. But I knew that he was trying to use the last bit of my feelings for him to get himself out of the situation. He even wanted to put all the blame on my head. Unfortunately, in my previous life, the Cindy who only wanted to deal with the matter peacefully has already died. I stood on the high platform, raising my hand and placing it in front of my lips to make a trumpet shape. But you, Leo, are not satisfied. Not only do you go out to find those disgusting doll experience centers, but you also contract diseases. You, Leo, have contracted HIV and AIDS in the 3 months that I have been traveling. 13 in my previous life. I didn't say those words. I just didn't even disclose his illness thinking of a peaceful breakup. That instead caught up with him. My reactions not only became proof of my weakness, but also a weapon in Leo's hands. That's why the people in Netstorm after that believed it. In a new life, I naturally wouldn't give him any more chances to rumor monger and slander me. As soon as my words fell, the crowd instantly froze. Face. Confused, glancing at each other. Leo was also stunned for a moment, and the expression on his face instantly became harsh. Cindy. Noticing that the surrounding gazes changed, Leo nervously looked towards the surroundings several times, no longer having the chutzpah of just now. Only hastily. Just when he was about to touch me. But I directly avoided it. The disgust on my face was not hidden. What did you say? I said. I am just traveling for 3 months. Kind of dirty disease. How do you want me to think? How do you want me to believe you? And how much money have you spent since we fell in love? I bought the house. I'm paying for the living expenses. And even your mom's medical expenses. I didn't say a word against you. But you turned around and accused me in front of everyone. And you know exactly what you made me look like. What are you doing now? Did I give you this AIDS? It's not that you're not willing to be lonely and go to a love museum to play with those things by yourself. I had a devastated look on my face, wiping away tears as I complained. I worked my ass off out there while you took my money and went to play with dolls. And now you're backtracking and saying I can't share the pain? Also, you said that I was spending time in a room with other men. Why didn't you say that there was a team following me? I'm obviously there to work. To talk about cooperation. How come I'm such a disgrace in your eyes? After I said all these words in my head, Leo's face had completely turned into anger. Cindy. Don't talk nonsense. You stay with those guys in the office for a whole day. Who knows what you guys are doing? Maybe you are the one who passed this disease to me. Leo directly began to bite. But the eyes of the surrounding grandparents had become very ugly. No matter how much he smashed and cursed, no one stood on his side. In the end, he even wanted to pounce, but was deadlocked by the bodyguards, and could only keep cursing, and I no longer speak, pretending to be sad and broken, just crying. The small secretary wrapped his hands around me, a face of indignation to warn him. If he does not go away, we'll call the police, which finally cleared down. After Leo left, I looked to the paparazzi hidden in the crowd and nodded my head in greeting. 12 In my previous life, I learned that Leo had contracted a dirty disease and made a scene to break up with him. But he cried and apologized to me. Kneeling downstairs in the neighborhood for 3 whole days, also found someone to film everything and posted it on the internet. Because those neighbors in the district to me is not good impression. So in the out of knowledge thought again is my reason. Then they all stood on Leo's side. Later, public opinion fermented and everyone said that we could share the sweet but not the bitter bad candy. Then I was cyber violated. And he took the opportunity to do it in the dark. And pushed me off a high building to my death. And at that time, he directly. All my secrets. Online game became a party rich. But now, everything has changed. I posted the 2 videos from the hospital and the neighborhood on the internet respectively. And found a lot of marketing numbers to do publicity. Exaggerate this relationship. I have all the evidence in my hands. And the inspection reports are clear. There were even quite a few photos of him stealing company secrets. For a while, Leo became a rat that everyone shouted at. He frantically called to curse me. And then cried and begged for forgiveness. And so on and so forth. Until I got fed up and changed my number and address. After that, I never heard from him again. 3 months later, Jennifer arrived in China with her team. Everyone in the company went to pick up the plane. During this time, the game was publicized quite strongly. And it aroused almost everyone's interest. In the last life, the game only existed in the eyes of geeks and other males. And in the eyes of others, it was just a pornography-related low-grade fun. But now, it has broken through the shackles. Facing all the people, it is also no longer abusive and vulgar to it. But expectant and longing. Hair Day is not a party of praise. And that's how I stood on the stage with Jennifer and introduced the world to this game that broke the shackles. 14 Getting Leo was a month after the game was released. People were in the middle of people's homes, experiencing paid-for romance guests in someone else's game wheel. When caught, the thief actually threatens to fling his AIDS case in the man's face. His dead first love. It's all about feeling that last warmth. The murderer came back after seeing his first love has been tarnished by him in various ways. Directly on the anger, the thief strangled to death in the game cabin. A case that was used as a base by the thief became the prop that finally muffled him. The fugitive was later arrested and the thief's body was pulled out. It was said to have rotted. The stench was overwhelming. Even his face was covered with all kinds of poisonous sores. But I still recognized that person at once. Leo. Hi, what are you doing? Just after putting down my cell phone, a hand was placed on my shoulder. I smiled and shook my head. Nothing. Just in news. What do you want to see me for? Jennifer also saw the picture of the man on the report and stared in disgust. Finally speaking slowly. It's not that big of a deal. The game is also very popular abroad now. And many companies have bought the rights from us. Although we are a cooperative agent. I thought that since we want to develop abroad as well, why don't we open a branch? I nodded my head and agreed to this. Looking up out the window, there were already skyscrapers competing for attention. This is what my life should be. This is how this game should develop. Remarks. YXYANs ITS AG Kids 6G, to see our 3BKGs ETW3J knowledgeable salt stories, all rights reserved. There is no snow in Iceland, total 1000 entries. View Ollie 2 Punch. Write a comment. Send a soda recommended for you. According to the recent popular recommendations, Villainous Mother After Rebirth. Lou punched the card I all wind and moon. I'm all wind and moon. Romance Rebirth 13.3 KLX 2171 bullet points. I'm the villain's early death pro mom. The villain's dad doesn't love his mom's early death. And his character is withdrawn. So he's paranoid about the heroine who had cured him. He used all means to take her by force. And in the end, he was not allowed to die. The system let me redeem. So I was reborn. Looking at my own son in the alley wearing a leather jacket dyed with a killer hair color, and currently alive and kicking. I weighed the kitchen knife in my hand and sneered. Redemption? That's called a mother in charge of her son. It's only right. One when the system brought me back to life. Zane was leading people to block a skinny little boy in an alley. Black leather jacket. Hair dyed dark purple. He leaned against the wall and played with the knife in his hand. His tone indifferent. Tell the truth or waste a hand? It's your choice. The whole 360-degree dead-angle delinquent boy. A young boy on the opposite side surrounded by a group of juniors was scared to death. However, the next moment, a delinquent boy tried to step on the trash can lid with one foot to enhance his momentum. As a result, he managed to get his crotch stuck because he underestimated the height of the trash can and grimaced. I watched from afar and exhaled deeply. Finally, with the system's incompetence in the way, I went into the supermarket next door and bought a kitchen knife. I was supposed to be dead. After giving birth to Zane, my body was getting weaker and weaker. But the hospital couldn't find any cause for my illness. Finally, I died when Zane was 3 years old. But I was reborn again as a 16-year-old girl. The system told me that my death was inevitable. Because it had to fit the villainous setting of Zane's character being withdrawn and paranoid due to his mom dying early and his dad not caring. That's also why Zane, who is desperately lacking in love, would die like a drowning person grasping the last straw, and not letting go after the heroine releases a little bit of kindness to him. But I have to be reborn again. Because the future's aim will blacken too much and even kill the hero and heroine. You have to redeem him and stop everything that happens behind. This is the system for my rebirth deal. But, redemption? I looked down at the brand new kitchen knife I just bought. A young, familiar face was reflected on the cold, glistening blade. I smiled coldly. That's called a mother controlling her son. And that's the way it's supposed to be. Zane thought no one had seen him make a fool of himself. So he stiffened his face and maintained his action for a moment before dropping his foot in mock exasperation by kicking the man. Don't fucking bullshit me. If you don't tell the truth, you won't be able to have both hands today. The harsh words were said with vigor. If you can ignore the fact that he was actually rubbing his ass with his hands behind his back. That's what I saw when I brought my knife over. The system thought I was angry and wanted to clean up the mess. And urged me to go all the way. But I just stood behind Zane and patted him on the shoulder with a smile. A toy knife won't break a man's leg. Want to get a better tool? Try this kitchen knife. For example, the cold surface of the knife pressed against Zane's cheek. Zane stiffened instantly and slowly lowered his hand from rubbing his ass. And then he was ashamed and furious. Shit. It was a common problem of a fool to care about the front and not the back. So Zane's original action of rubbing his ass to ease the pain gradually became reckless. He even patted his little buttocks a few times with a good sense of self-consciousness. All of which I saw. I sighed, thinking to myself, just how did Zane, with this stupid lack of a second doggy look, blacken up to the point of killing both the male and female main characters? Is it hard to make the hero and I laughing with his clear stupidity? System, please respect the villain who was full of childish innocence before this world was blackened. I made an O sound. Then I looked down at Zane's inner lining, that was vaguely exposed by the split in his pants. And didn't hold back a squirt. Childish innocence. So it's Pinky. The system didn't dare say anything. For obviously, my appearance disrupted Zane's plans. Amidst a group of Big Brother voices, who panicked and felt that Zane was going to be Dark Sharkhead in the next second, he calmly turned around. Condescending. He tried to use disdain to cover up his earlier humiliation. Who are you? Can't you see that your grandpa food took this place first? I wanted to say something, just as I was about to remind him that his pants were split. An obviously angry female voice rang out. Zane. You're bullying your classmates again. The timing of this coincides with the first meeting between Zane and the heroine. There's only one short sentence in the original episode. Sylvia stops Zane's bullying, and also manages to get Zane to set his sights on her. But Zane actually encounters more. The girl with the glasses rushes over to Zane and accuses her. And Zane rolls his eyes before finally interrupting. Snow, do you really think you can control me just because you're class president? My dad doesn't even care about me. You're not qualified. Snow grimaced. I also cringed at the sound. I was just about to open my mouth to speak. But I sensed something and turned around and kicked the boy who sneaked up on me when no one was looking. The man let out a mournful scream. Crap. So fierce? Zane jumps in shock. Then immediately reacts. You're still fucking stubborn. He was so furious that he immediately rolled up his sleeves and raised his fists towards the boy's face and smashed it fiercely. If I don't beat you to death today, I won't be known as Fu. The action of the fight was crisp and clean. But a little powder at the buttocks is getting bigger and bigger around into a silence. In addition to Zane's face and indignation. Zane. I'm going to tell the teacher. I'm going to tell the teacher. Zane's self-confessed handsome posture instantly stiffened. His face was grim. And he looked at Snow with unkind eyes. Say that again. Did I say something wrong? Snow shook off Sylvia's hand that stopped her and raised her chin in a provocative tone. When Mr. Fu and teacher get married, I'll see how long you can continue to be arrogant. Zane's hand hanging at his side clenched into a fist. John clenched his hand into a fist. He stared at Snow and subconsciously took a step forward. Then he can still be arrogant for quite a long time. After all, the surname Fu's blindness is not once or twice. I stood on my tiptoes and patted Zane's head. Coaxing. Good boy. Stand behind me and stay. Zane suddenly lost his temper. He twisted his head to look at me. You're all in the same boat. Snow rolled his eyes as he looked at me. His tone disgusted. You're just a bunch of rich punks who think your family has a little bit of money. But in reality, you're just a bunch of social scum who can only bully the weak and the small. Then let's see what the so-called weaklings in your mouth have done. I didn't bother to argue. I leaned over and pulled out a cell phone from the boy's pocket. The cell phone album had a password. I threatened the boy with a kitchen knife and gave him the password. Flipped through a few pictures and handed the phone over to Snow, who held his head high and didn't look at it. On the contrary, Sylvia took it, and soon her face changed drastically. She cursed hatefully, but not to Zane, but to the boy who was curled up on the ground. In the camera album, all of them were secretly taking photos of the girl's privacy. Snow soon realized that she had made a mistake since. But she didn't apologize. She still talked tough, although what he did was not right. But it's even more wrong for you to beat someone up like this. What's more, these photos don't show your face. Who knows whose they are? Maybe people just look at them privately themselves. You hit someone. You should apologize to this student first. Now even Sylvia was walking away from her. To which Zane commented. Idiot. You're right. The anger that had been suppressed earlier completely erupted. The system said that because of the need to fit the persona of the villain in this world, so everyone except the female lead is full of brainless malice towards Zane. I laughed in anger. If you don't think he's guilty of this, then I'll take these pictures of you right now. It's not like I'm going to show my face. And I'm just going to look at them myself in private anyway. What are you doing? Then I walked towards her and Zhang. She warned me. You're breaking the law. I'm going to call the police. I ignored it and continued my actions. Until Snow was scared and cried. I face-palmed. If you know it's illegal to sneak a peek, what makes you think Zane did anything wrong? He's just a punk. A punk? I laughed. A punk who stops evil and protects little girls? You do realize that before that scumbag snuck up on me, the kid was at best a verbal threat. You think he's a punk. But to the girls who were secretly filmed, he's a hero. Probably Zane had rarely heard anyone describe themselves as a hero. He froze for a moment, then tilted his head in triumph. Even when I asked him to crush this so-called class president on next year's final exam, the man agreed flatly. Snow was so pissed off that he ran away crying. Sylvia looked at Snow, who ran away and didn't immediately chase after him. Instead, she seriously apologized to Zane. Fought, and now. This made me feel a lot better about the heroine. When I turned my head, I saw that Zane was still giggling. I really couldn't hold back, and directly hit the back of that round and beautifully shaped head once. Don't you have a mouth? Don't know how to explain? Zane held his head in his hands and let out a no. Wait. He realized something was wrong and wondered. No. Who are you? So I hefted the cleaver in my hand and smiled broadly. Word for word, I'm your mom. Zane decided I was provoking him. Even though I could tell you exactly what birthmarks Zane had on his body. Sean was still not convinced, even though he was red-faced and trying to stop me. So I told him to call Jason. And not once did I get through. I watched the smile at the corner of Zane's lips fade a little. After a while of silence, I asked him, has it always been like this? What? Jason doesn't answer your calls. Zane froze, but he quickly turned his head, casually kicked the can at his feet and sneered. I'm not dead yet. I don't need him to care. You've got some skills. Even prying into my news. So, he suddenly stopped mid-sentence. Zane stared blankly at his cell phone, and then cursed in a low voice. I raised my hand and cursed. No swearing. He didn't jump out of his skin. He just gripped the phone tightly and his eyes reddened. I glanced at it. It was a photo. In the photo, Jason was reaching out to support a pretty young woman, who was suitably showing a pouty expression. It was probably the angle of the shot that made the two look intimate in demeanor. Hey you. Zane calls out to me. His face sinking. He sneered. Since you said you're my mom, I'll send you over to catch you in the act. The tone of his voice carried a hint of not so subtle hostility. I looked at Zane quietly and suddenly asked, you're angry? Why? On the information given by the system, the relationship between Zane and Jason, the father and son, was not good. And Zane has long indicated that he won't take over the Fu family in the future. And when he reaches adulthood, he will disassociate himself from Jason as a father and son. So Jason looking for a woman. What is he angry about? Zane pursed his lips and did not say anything, but his eyes became more and more red. In the end, it was the little brother beside him who reminded me in an extremely low voice. Today it's the anniversary of Big Brother's mom's death. Now it was my turn to be stunned. For a moment, I couldn't figure out what Zane's attitude towards my long-dead mom was. Zane went to the school to catch an adulterer. The girl in the photo is his homeroom teacher. The door to his office was kicked in hard. Zane inserted his pockets and spoke in a loose tone. I'm sorry for disturbing your matchless relationship. But why didn't you tell me earlier that you wanted to find Mr. Kiao as your second wife? Today is the anniversary of my mom's death. I happened to go to talk to her. Let her also see this later, sister. The tone of voice is provocative, and with imperceptible anger. I feel that just because of Zane's mouth. Jason did not beat him to death is a bit of fatherly love. Mr. Fu. Annie responded, but I caught a quick flash of impatience and boredom on her face. Her tone was helpless. Don't get me wrong. I was just discussing your matter with Mr. Fu. Is it discussing about me or discussing about you guys getting married in the future? Zane. The voice was so cold that no emotion could be heard. But Zane suddenly stopped his mouth as if he was violently pinched by someone's neck. The man with his back to us turned around and looked at Zane calmly. Apologize. Zane pursed his lips. He didn't say anything, but his eyes were red and he stared at Jason with a deadly stare. Obviously, he was his father and son, but he looked at me like he was some kind of enemy. It's nothing. Annie hurriedly opened her mouth to ease the atmosphere, and smiled towards Jason. Mr. Fu is just a little misunderstood. Apologize. Jason walked to Zane's front. his eyes hanging down. His tone was calm. Fu's family doesn't produce educated children. I clearly felt Zane's body instantly stiffen, and the hand hanging at his side was clenched into a fist. I thought to myself, this brat says he doesn't want Jason to control him, but in reality, he clearly cares about Jason's words. So he sighed, although the probability is that it's the Wen family's bloodline problem. But Mr. Fu's problem of always turning his elbow to the outside. Isn't it a bit excessive? Jason made a movement, like he was instantly frozen in place. This outburst also made Zane remember that there was another me beside him. He turned his head, and through the action of glaring at me, he reached out and pulled me back again. In a low voice, he cursed. If you mess with him at this time, even I can't save you. Zane. Who is she? Jason then noticed me, who was blocked by Zane. The man who was always cool and reserved rarely showed his out-of-control side. He grabbed Zane's arm and stared at me without blinking. His voice was vaguely shaky as he repeated, "Who is she?" Zane froze. "Xia Wen. I'm so sorry that I've tarnished the noble bloodline of your Fu family. This is not the guilt in my heart. So I just jumped out of the coffin thinking to apologize in person with you. Mr. Fu?" I looked up at Jason with a provocative smile. I turned my head and patted Zane's head again. They say that when you have a stepmother, you have a stepfather. Here. Apologize to your stepdad. Zane's ability to piss people off follows me, but not as good as me. Still have to learn. San looked at Jason and then at me. Finally, she said, "Shit. Is this really an adultery scene? Jason and I are in a business marriage. I thought it was a strong alliance. But later I realized that it was just my parents entrusting me with an orphan. And Jason is a man of promises. After my mom and dad got sick and left, he did fulfill the promise he made back then. It's not about love, though. But that's why I believe Jason will take good care of my son. At least it shouldn't be like this. I heard you're getting married to that Mr. Kiao? Congratulations. The matter of coming back from the dead was too unbelievable. That's why Jason tried his best to maintain his composure as he reacted and led Zane and me away. As the partition rose, I inclined my head to look at Jason. The man had long since reverted to his usual cold demeanor, as if the loss of composure I just experienced was just an illusion. His eyelashes fluttered and his tone was rare. A little bemused. Don't listen to him. I didn't. Jason paused, wanting to say something but seemingly too shy to do so. The man was a good-looking man, and the years seemed to be treating him extraordinarily well. I looked at Jason's face, which had barely even changed, and tugged at the corner of my mouth. It's actually okay for you to marry someone else. I've never wanted to marry anyone but you. Two voices sounded at the same time. Then both froze at the other's words. I was the first to react and smiled. You've already fulfilled your agreement with my dad. So there's no need to worry about anything. Not to mention you're still young and busy with company matters. It's good to have someone at home to help you out. Jason's face became colder and colder with my words. Finally, he couldn't hold back and interrupted. You came back just to tell me this? The tone of his voice was sharp, and vaguely carried a bit of aggression. So I collected the smile on my face and dropped my gaze to the fender. It seemed that way I could see Zane sitting in front of me. Of course not. I whispered. After a pause. Jason, you're putting my son through the ringer. The good little boy whose first name was Mommy when he opened his mouth. The stupid kid who would let me pinch him when I was sick in bed and say he wanted to hurt with his mommy. The child who made a promise to meet again before I died. After his mom died. He suffered a lot. But he didn't even have someone he could talk to about his grievances. The tone was calm and tinged with anger. You promised I would take care of him. I knew Jason was cold. After all, it took me 4 years of marriage to warm up the ice cube a little. But I thought he'd change because Zane was the closest thing he had to blood. That's when I remembered, as an afterthought, what the system had said earlier about Zane's original ending. No one to save him. Eventually dying alone in the long wait. Unname's anger screamed through my body to be vented. And not just at the man in front of me. Jason froze and stared at me. He seemed to want to explain something. Opened his mouth but nothing came out. In the end, all he could do was look away in an almost wolfish manner. Huh. Jason spoke in a low voice, not defending himself too much. So the anger turned into powerlessness. I remind. I'm not the one you should be apologizing to. Jason is silent. Nines Ain still can't believe his own mom came back from the dead. Even returned as a 16-year-old girl who looked younger than him. He was a little wary and squirmy at first. But those emotions disappeared after I led him through a day of gaming. I believe you're my real mom. Sane held his cell phone. His eyes shining. Who would have thought that the delinquent who dyed his hair a killer color and went out to be surrounded by a bunch of minions was behind his back? A little punk who could still go 110 with an Angela? I didn't even raise my head. You're better than your dad. The game stopped abruptly with Angela. Not surprisingly. It's 111. Sane mouthed. I'm definitely better than that old man. While periodically moving a little closer to me and pausing for a long time. The meaning was obvious. So I thought about it and added. He usually uses his cell phone as a Buddha bead tray when he plays games. What does that mean? Because he's always not killing anyone. San looked down at the one on the game screen and gushed. Then he's really trashy. Especially in listening to me say that I 6 God Su Tem VP carry the whole game. And Jason's Aro 12 sorry the whole game. Is silly happy without heart. Until the one who was spit on stood behind me. Holding 2 glasses of milk. It's time to go to bed. Jason remembered that I have the habit of drinking a glass of milk before going to bed. He hesitated and put the milk in his hand in front of Zane. Coldly, drink it. Since Jason's voice. Zane, who was still showing his teeth and giggling, collected the smile on his face and stared at the screen of his cell phone without raising his head. He didn't look up from the screen of his cell phone, and didn't pick up the glass of milk.